but we're working on that. So the Prevention Council meets regularly, and we also meet every year in a rural community. We've been here in Mesquite. Most recent community we were at was in Alamo. And believe it or not, Alamo has a fabulous facility that we went to. And but the challenge we always find in the rural community is the same thing. Not enough professionals that want to live there or live there to do the treatment, both for the batterer and the victim. A real challenge geographically to get them to the services that you need in the urban areas. No transport available for the batterers when the judges want to sentence them to a treatment program. Quite often the treatment programs don't exist in their community, so they have to send them somewhere else, either into Las Vegas or Reno. A challenge for the batterer because, you know, he's got to work, he's got to have a living, make a living, he's got to be able to still do his day job. And so these are things that we're trying to work through. We're talking about now maybe trying to do some video type of treatment, video conferencing type of activity where you have a counselor maybe in an urban area working with a batterer who's focused in his home community. Likewise with the victims, same challenges we have on domestic violence where sexual assault sometimes is quite often involved. When we're talking about doing the exams for sexual assault victims, the nurses, which is a specialty kind of area, don't always exist in our communities and rural communities, so they have to then agree to travel to the urban areas to get that type of exam that's necessary to support whatever proof that is necessary for the sexual assault. So those are challenges for us, and we're still moving through that process, working with our communities and figuring out how we address that and help the communities. One area that we have worked on in my office is on the prosecution side. One challenge we had in our rural communities that I found when I first started in 2007 as the Attorney General was that there wasn't any prosecution, not enough resources to assist the prosecutors in the rural communities to prosecute these cases. And so they were going unprosecuted, and the batterers knew that the DAs were prioritizing their cases and were going after some of the more violent cases, and they knew there might be a chance that nothing would happen to them. So hearing that, I applied to the federal government through my office and received a grant to be able to fund a prosecutor to put in the rural communities. This was a pilot project. And so we partnered with, right now we call it the Tri-County Project, and we partnered with Lincoln County, White Pine County, and Eureka County. We got approval from the county commissioners there to collaborate through their DAs. And the DAs, the 3 DAs in those communities, and I signed an MOU. And I said, we will hire the prosecutor. We'll agree who that prosecutor is going to be. But he'll be a prosecutor from my office, but he will be housed in one of your agencies, in one of your buildings, and he will then travel through those 3 communities, work with you DAs and do the prosecution. That project kicked off, I want to say, in 2008, and it has been a success. Our prosecutor is housed right there in White Pine County with the DA, but he works with 3 DAs in those tri-counties and has been successfully prosecuting both domestic violence and sexual assault cases. It's been so successful that the feds decided to give us money again for another tri-county project, which we then did in kind of the southern part of the state, where we have Nye County working with Lander County and a couple of the other counties there to do the same thing. And so for our purposes, it was about trying to work with the communities, coming together and addressing these issues. And so that's what we've been doing on domestic violence. Finally, let me just say, because we've led the nation in the number of women who were murdered 2 legislative sessions ago, I introduced a bill into the legislative session to create a fatality review team, a statewide fatality review team, to take a look at why these deaths were happening. Go over, basically it was called like a case review. We would find a case that's closed, no longer going through the system, where a woman had been killed as a result of a domestic violence situation, and go through her life and figure out through the course of her life and her marriage and what was going on, where did we as a community, where could we have done a better job in recognizing the signs of domestic violence and helping her before it ended in that fatality. And so The legislature and the governor at the time approved the bill. We created this fatality review team. We did our first fatality review in Nye County, issued a report to the legislature. It's on our website if you're interested. Our most recent one was in Elko County. We're getting ready to issue the report there. And now we're getting ready to go into Lyon County to do the same thing. The intent of our fatality review board statewide is to focus on the rural communities, because Washoe has their own fatality review team that actually has been in existence for at least 8 years. And Clark County is creating their own fatality review team to look at these domestic violence fatalities. And then we feed into one another. We all work together, sharing the same information, and then pushing it out to the legislators, to the governor's office, to whoever's interested, and to the local communities on what we're finding. It is not a blame game. We don't say, you failed, you didn't do this, or that's not what it's about. It's about coming together as a community. We invite in that community, we talk, how can we do a better job? What systems do we have to put in place? How can we communicate better? How can we relate to one another and work together? And it's been really positive. And so we're going to continue that process in this week. But that's on the domestic violence side. And so that's what we've been working on, and we will continue to work on in the state of Nevada. Along with domestic violence, as we all know, it is such a cycle of control and violent world. You see a lot of strangulation, you see sexual assault. Related to domestic violence is now what we're seeing, which is what I'm calling the sex trafficking. What is that? That is the commercial sexual exploitation of an individual. I want to say about 10 years ago, when I was working at the county as assistant county manager, I worked with our juvenile justice facility, both the judge, juvenile judge, and the director of the juvenile justice system. And at that time, we saw coming into the juvenile justice system a lot of minors that were being arrested for prostitution. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. Frankly, however, the minors that were coming in were mainly from out of state. So our judges, we got together, we created, it's called JDAI, which is the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, to figure out how we can do a better job working with our youth, making sure that we are treating them and not just confining them and then putting them back out on the streets in the same environment they came from and expect them to succeed. So we're doing a lot of these new things. So that was my first kind of open into something's going on here with our kids. Now let me just couch this by saying, you heard I was a criminal prosecutor for a couple of years with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. That office is very unique. It's the only federal office that actually acts as the DA, because Washington, D.C. doesn't have a DA. So it's the only federal office that actually has federal prostitution crimes, federal DUI, which is normally those types of crimes are left to the district attorney. In our jurisdiction, we have a U.S. attorney and DAs in 17 counties. The DAs usually handle the prostitution and the DUIs and those types of things, and the U.S. attorney does not. Washington, D.C. was different. We actually were the DAs. And so a couple of years I worked there and worked and prosecuted prostitution cases. There was a street I knew. All the prostitutes would go. Every Monday over the weekend, they'd come in. They'd be arrested by law enforcement. They'd come in. We'd set the cases up, and we would go to trial and prosecute.